I got to thinking about patch 8.3, like as in right now, a snapshot of the state of WoW. It takes some mental gymnastics for me to say this, but I think that WoW in its current form is, well, one, it's very close to what we can expect in Shadowlands, and two, I think it's some of the best the game has been in years. Wait, what? I said that just the other day in my weekly roundup, which, by the way, everyone should be watching every Saturday. Ho, ho, ho. Some would agree that, yes, World of Warcraft as it is at this moment is in a good place, while others are like, what the hell are you smoking, Soul? Here is the fastest downvote you've ever got. But as promised, I'm going to speak on this subject at length. The current snapshot of World of Warcraft, how this is going to be similar to Shadowlands, and why this might be a positive for the game as a whole. And of course, here are the sponsors who make this sort of thing possible. I didn't forget about you guys. Let's break down what I mean when I say that WoW right now feels pretty darn good. Consider that many of us, not all of us, but many of us, have unlocked most of what we need on our primary character or our main, from the flight point to the war campaign, to flying, to essences, and of course, the etceteras. Today, our alts are living it up pretty good, and that's hard to deny. In just a day or so, a fresh max level character can get their item level up into the 400s, their neck level around like the high 60s or so. A bit more work, and they could access level 3 essences their main first obtained, and suddenly they're quite capable of running LFR, horrific visions, low-level mythic keys, PvP, islands, warfronts, and more. Like many of you stuck at home, I've been leveling alts as well, so I can say with great confidence and experience for a change that you can develop capable characters without nearly as much work as before. We're spending less time developing our characters to that level of feasibility, and more time playing our characters, throwing them at tougher challenges for rewards. Of course, this feeling only came after the 20-month-long roller coaster of emotion that was the Battle for Azeroth expansion itself. From the awkwardness of Azerite gear to grinding for flight and essences and every other thing that we can nitpick, like forced personal loots with item level restrictions. That's my pet peeve, so yeah, you and those item level rules. My praise is not on the entirety of Battle for Azeroth, I'm talking about right now, which still has those damn item level restrictions. The right now of BFA is the likely jumping off point of what we can expect in Shadowlands that's coming up. Actually, let me rephrase that into some feedback. The way BFA plays out right now should be an idea of what we can expect in Shadowlands. Minus all the stuff that has been almost universally reviled. So let's clear our heads by getting away from BFA for a bit and move into what we know about the Shadowlands approach. We know that on our first playthrough that we're going to play through this sort of on-rails experience, but afterwards, on our alts, those restrictions are going to, for the most part, be lifted. Alt Game Plus, as I've called it. We can level the way that we like, and immediately have access to late-game systems like Covenant progression, daily and world quests, and more. That's another way of saying I don't really know what. This is sort of a reflection of how essences in BFA are treated now. I myself haven't been shy about wanting some sort of compromise between the rigidness of having to repeat the original grinds for essences per alt versus giving it away as an account-wide system as many fans have suggested. Think of Mr. Pandaria, when reaching Revered with a Reputation unlocked a reputation bonus that was account-wide. Your alts still needed to do the work, the same work, in fact, but at least it's less. BFA 8.3 took a more open approach. Obtaining a level 3 essence in the intended way unlocked a more universal method of obtaining them on your alts. It's not as straightforward, but it's hard to argue that getting all the rank 3 essences you need on your alts takes very long at all. It's pretty fast. Folks like Ian have often said that the dev team leans conservatively when it comes to alt friendliness. They don't want to see a meta where the optimal thing to do is to unlock everything on the most efficient class and spec, and then toss that character aside so you can get to playing on your real character. They don't want that sort of meta at all. For people in my guild, and those of you who've been watching me over the years, you'd probably do a double take seeing me release a video on how I complete a 5-chest division on my balanced druid. Like, what the heck, a balanced druid? What sort of stupid name is a... whatever. I like to think of each of my characters, my alts, as having their own personal story of growth and development. I know I can't just pick up any class and play it optimally. I don't think I can do it on my main character anyway. But anyway, if that story of my character, of my alt, is too short, if everything that I earn the first time is gifted to other characters too quickly, then that story, that experience feels too cheapened, but that's just coming from me. I veered off a bit, but the point that I'm making is what Blizzard achieved after all of these 8.3 hotfixes was to create a WoW that balances work with accessibility, while giving us a plethora of content to choose from. Which isn't really giving Blizzard much credit at all, because we are at the end of the expansion. This is more or less a repeat of what Legion finally did, giving us a legendary vendor, like, oh, okay, now we can enjoy things on our alts. Shadowlands so far has no equivalent to essences or artifact power. The closest thing to Essence abilities would be Covenant abilities, which are powers that we borrow while leveling our first characters, but on alts we choose a Covenant from the very start. In this case, it's less of a catch-up and more of a, oh, hey, it's okay to skip the main story quest if you want to. It appears that Blizzard is acknowledging that this is skippable or optional content, so take that, you time-played conspiracy nuts. So what about Soulbinds, the talent tree-like, glyph-like amalgam that's unique to each Covenant? Many fans talk this up as if it was the new artifact power, but this has since been corrected. These too will have a pacing mechanism to ensure that the characters who are at the front of the progression race can still incrementally progress, aka time gating. But players who are behind can always catch up. So it's not artifact power, it's like Valor points, Conquest catch-ups, or Cloak progression if you want to think about 8.3. If you're still not convinced, let's run the clip.
But moving away from that towards a place that's more easily attainable caps, and then open-ended flexibility. So imagine in your Covenant Sanctum, you're gonna do various activities and likely earn and retrieve anima from the Maw and elsewhere that is essential to fueling your Covenant's activities. The first bit of it every week might effectively keep the lights on in your Covenant Sanctum, and that would further the strength of your Soulbind.
Okay.
And that's a minimum level of engagement. Think of it as like capping Valor and Mists of Pandaria, or even maybe a bit short from that.
Okay.
And as long as you're doing that every week, you are optimal. As well as catch-up mechanisms that aren't some mathematically driven formula like knowledge, but let's say whether you're an alt, you took some time off, you're coming to the expansion late, you are a few points behind where par is or where the curve is, that may be something that just shows up randomly on world quests where you can just earn an entire talent point effectively while you're in this catch-up state until you get caught up to par. Because we don't want this sense of I am behind or
right.
But we do want goals to look forward to and choices and player power progression.
Okay.
So the idea is something along the lines of an easily attainable minimum threshold that's required for power optimality.
Finally, let's talk about how Blizzard is striving to not repeat the same mistakes they did in BFA. The way I see it, it started with Azeroth, which simply didn't work. But Azeroth wasn't the only thing new Blizzard was trying. They brought in new tech with islands and warfronts. We could argue that if they focused on one of these things and not the others, for example Azeroth, the system could have been a lot better. In turn, that would have let Blizzard expand on this mythical, successful Azeroth system as opposed to developing a band-aid system like Essences. But there are a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas. There's no use crying over spilled milk, not this late in the game. Shadowlands hopes to be a bit different. Now, Torghast is new tech, and Torghast might suck. I just hope it doesn't. But Covenants are, according to Ian, the main feature of Shadowlands, and Covenants seem like a much more grounded system. A few minutes ago, I described it as a cross between talent trees and glyphs. Now, at the risk of being misleading, this seems to be much easier to understand. I'll explain this briefly using the information that we know. We choose our soulbind, aka a talent tree, to develop. Then we choose a talent, and we can respec them with a talent tome. We move down the tree by collecting anima, aka daily or weekly content that has maximum caps and catch-ups. We fill these empty slots with conduits, and we find these somewhere. That's pretty much all I got.
Battle for Azeroth, things like essences were there more as a band-aid to flaws in the system that quickly became apparent after Battle for Azeroth was live. We didn't launch the system with the intent of expanding it. I think our goal with Shadowlands would be that there may be horizontal or vertical expansion of the existing system, but not new systems layered on top of it. So you might get an additional soulbind that you gain access to through later story content that broadens your options, or an extra row to their trees. But that's a very different story than a totally different progression system like, let's say, essences.
I think soulbinds are easy enough to understand and expand on. As they said, give us a few new rows, maybe a different soulbind tree to develop. We can already figure Torghast is going to feel taller, as we're able to climb higher and face newer and tougher challenges. On the other hand, Azerite was confusing. It started with 4 levels and later it expanded to 5, but since it was on gear, it was like, okay, now I have to re-earn the same gear to get the additional slots, but then maybe a different combination seemed better afterwards. It was just more confusing than it needed to be, and the payoff didn't feel all that cool. But let's try to wrap this up on a positive note. 8.3 post-hotfixes are the bits of tweaks that made the final stretch of this very bumpy expansion enjoyable. Some of these changes are a taste of Blizzard's friendlier approach in Shadowlands, with familiar systems that are easier to understand. Alt-friendliness at the start of the expansion, not just the final patch. The end of infinite systems, replaced with easy caps and catch-up, and progression paths for every audience, as a raid, a party, or an individual. And with any luck, it's gonna be fun. Friends and critics, the alpha will soon be upon us, and if I can get in, I hope to share my experiences and feedback with you, so please join me here on YouTube and Twitch as a subscriber, and consider becoming a patron so I can keep giving you more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you in the alpha, I hope. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.